The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program. It's time for the Share Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host, O.
On today's episode of the Share Podcast, Alan, now 30 years old and 6 years clean, takes us through 8 years of severe alcoholism and drug abuse. He started experimenting with alcohol and pot at the age of 15 and added cocaine and crystal meth to the mix at age 19. As a child, he hated alcohol because his mother was a full-blown alcoholic. One morning, his troubled family finally splits up, leaving him and his dad together without any more notice than a letter on the table saying goodbye. Alan was only 10 years old. Lost, confused, and abandoned, he finally finds relief at the age of 15 when he starts drinking, smoking pot, and shoots up 8 inches in height. It's at this time in his life that women start to notice him and he finally starts to feel a part of society for the first time. Over the next 8 years, his drug abuse and alcoholism escalate quickly and Alan starts dealing drugs in order to support his habits. For the final 3 years of active addiction, Alan ends up homeless, sleeping in someone's kitchen, dealing cocaine, weed, and crystal meth as a busboy in a bar, and finally moves into a trailer with his mother to avoid being arrested. When his alcohol dependency reaches an all-time high, he calls his father and asks for help. This phone call saves his life. It's an amazing story of hope and recovery. Join us now. Hey, Alan. Thanks for joining us.
How you doing, Omar?
I'm doing great, man. It's great to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. You know, the good night's rest and all that stuff, but I'm doing good.
Got your coffee ready?
Yeah, I'm hanging out.
Excellent. You ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do this.
Perfect. All right, Alan, let's dive right in, man. Tell us about how your life is today. Your hobbies, what you do for a living. Take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery.
Well, I'm actually a gym rat, you know,
yes, you are.
And that progressed as I've been in recovery more than anything. It's been my safety net when it comes to sanity and all those kinds of things. But usually we wake up, go to the gym, do something that has to do with some kind of physical exercise. And eating-wise and all that, we have a pretty good diet over here. After that, usually go to work like every other schmuck. I try to keep it as real as possible, you know, and I try to make sure to include a meeting in the day later on, do something that has to do with that. I keep in touch with my sponsor. I try to keep in touch with people in the groups. I'm a pretty sick guy when it comes down to it, and if I don't stay directed from the get when I wake up, I can get real squirrely.
Now, you make a lot of meetings, dude. That's for sure. On an average, what would you say you make per week?
About 4. I mean, we were making a lot, almost 6 a week for a long, long time.
I remember. Yep.
And in the beginning, you know, I was definitely making 6 plus during, you know, I didn't have anything else to do. I used to ride the bus, didn't have a car, didn't have anything, woke up, had nothing to do on the Saturday, Sundays because I had a regular call center job, you know, where I was doing customer service for like Hyundai or some companies, you know, like that. So Saturday, Sundays were like dead zone, man. And I had no money and I was just going to meetings, man. That was all I was doing. So I would easily make that kind of stuff. But, you know, life gets better, so.
Yeah, well, trust me. Early on, that was the right move. All right, addicts. I tell guys, especially like my sponsees early on, if you've got money in your pocket, it's like kryptonite to an addict.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, if you got more than you need in there, you might use it for something you're not supposed to.
Well, it's not even, you don't know it's not for what you're supposed to at first, and then you need it for something else later on.
I don't think you and Raquel have any workout goals, do you? Because you guys are both ripped. So I don't know if there's anything more that you guys have as far as workout goals.
Actually, you know, we do. We're putting...
Oh, sick.
You know, this year, it's not really as much as a workout goal as a diet goal. We're giving up fast food completely.
Okay.
Nothing with the drive-through window. And, of course, my sponsor was like, yeah, you're just going to find a way to walk into the places.
Well, we didn't drive through.
Yeah, exactly. And what else? I'm trying to get actually another few pounds of muscle and increase my squats to somewhere around like 330, something like that. But
dude, Those are lofty goals. All right. Well, you and your wife are in amazing shape. I'm trying to follow suit here. I'm sitting right now drinking. My wife made a green drink this morning, so I'm having a green drink. It actually doesn't taste too bad. I don't know what's in it. Don't care. But I know it's healthy.
Yeah.
And my papaya with granola. All right. So
Yeah, but that's
at least,
good, man.
My wife's like, look, how do I put this lightly? You need to get into shape. All right. I'm like, all right, honey.
Yeah, like I said before, man, the exercise for me is a sanity thing. It's not anything else. It just happens that I stay in shape.
Yeah, well, you guys look great, and, well, you motivate me, and I'm sure you motivate a lot of the guys in the room. It gives you a healthy alternative to all the other crap you could be doing when you're not in the meetings.
Yeah.
All right, Alan, let's go back in time a little bit now. How old were you the first time you drank or used drugs, and more importantly, how did that make you feel?
Well, the first experiences I ever had with beer were young. I mean, it was around my house all the time. It runs in my family. I probably had my first beer experience with just a little bit of sip here, sip there, and stuff like that when I was 8, and then moved on when I know in Costa Rica, the first time I ever had a shot was when I was about 11, maybe 10, and that was interesting because I rejected it. I didn't like it. Even though the burning sensation, the whole idea, and it was like this cheap, horrible stuff, you know, it wasn't amazing. It was, and my parents did it on purpose, I think, you know. And,
why?
And it was because they knew that I was just gonna, because I kept asking them, I was like, let me have some, I want to try it. And so my dad, or I think it was my mom, somebody like here, like, I'm not condoning this, I don't want you to, you know, but if you're not gonna leave us alone, you gotta, here, try this. And so I took it, and it was like the most awful thing I'd ever had in my life. And, you know, and so.
Did you get a buzz?
No, not like a buzz, but like it made me, my nose and my face and all these different things happen, you know, like I was like, why would you do that to yourself? I remember thinking that to myself, like, why do you guys do this? And the next experience I had, though, was when I was about 15. We had this older guy that we worked with, and I already had a job at the time. I mean, I washed cars before I could legally work in California, all this different stuff, so. But when I was 15, my friend bought this peppermint schnapps.
I remember.
And, man, I must have drank like half of that bottle for the first, because I didn't even let it hit me until it was too late.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
So, like, I had a good about 10 minutes of this feeling of, like, immense hammered. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life, followed by the worst experience of my life. Not the worst experience. I've gone through much worse actually now, but like the instance, I threw up for a good 6 hours. It was awful. So, but that 10 minutes is what stuck in my head, and
right.
That's what basically led me on to the next time it was obviously the next day. It went from being absolutely zero, straight edge kid. I listened to punk rock. I did all these different things. I hated the fact, because, you know, my family's, it's got problems, you know, like a lot of us, and I hated watching it fall apart. But, you know, that feeling, man, I didn't have that wretched thought process constantly telling me, like, something's wrong. That's what triggered it.
That feeling of everything's right in the world for the first time. I get it. So now, how much clean time do you have, and when's your anniversary date?
My anniversary date is December 24th.
Right.
Christmas Eve, and I have 6 years as of this last December 24th.
That's right, buddy. Congratulations.
Yeah, it was a good meeting, too, you know. It makes my anniversary about me staying in the groups and doing the things that I do, because I tell you, addicts are great people once they're clean. And,
yes.
You know,
true.
So what ends up happening is my anniversary is very small. It's not like a lot of these people where they get like 30, 40 people. Everybody says, hey, congratulations, all that kind of stuff. It's usually like about 10 people that are the hardcore friends, or people that are just like, I hate Christmas. So it's an interesting dynamic a lot of times. But I had a great anniversary. I felt like this year, because at 5 they tell you that popping sound, you know, happens. And I didn't experience it. I think this year it actually happened a lot more. I'm very clear on what it means to be happy in recovery versus what it was before, where I was just like, okay, I made it to 5, now I'm at 6, and a lot of things have changed, you know.
No, they have. You guys just bought a house. There's that transition. Now you hit 5, and then I don't know, you're expecting something. But that year 5, you're like, a lot did happen.
Yeah, we started the year. It was rough, had some experiences that we didn't want to go through with, purchasing a home and so forth. But the reality is that was part of it, man. We used the meetings. We went, shared about it, had people tell us. And we had some really good advice from people in the groups, too, that were just saying, like, look, don't freak out about it. Don't go that route. Everybody has their own path, and you don't need to hold a resentment toward these people. Because what happened was, the house thing in the beginning, it fell through. And these people took some money from us, and they set us up on the day of signing, decided to back out, and this and that. I mean, it was a bad scene in the beginning of the year. So, and it all changed. We ended up finding a great place. We're here now. It's beautiful. Things are working.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's turn the show over to you, Alan. It's time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally, your journey into recovery up until today. So, Alan, take it away.
All right. Well, in the beginning, like I had just shared a second ago, with first experience and going from there, I hit the ground running when it came to the using thing. I was a normal kid. I didn't have too many different things going on in my head. I was a blonde Californian raised in the beach areas. And I think the thing that really was interesting to me about my behaviors is that I always wanted to go and do things that got me away from being responsible. It got me away from doing the important things that I had to do with my life, which in that case at that age is school. Right. So I struggled with paying attention in school. I struggled with doing the right things with grades. And, whenever I had a motivation, because my dad figured this out, he gave me motivations. Like, if you did this through your grades, I'll buy you this. So about in like 4th grade, he gave me this option that I was going to get a motorcycle, like a little dirt bike. And I got fucking straight A's, man. Like, there was nothing in my life that was gonna deter me from getting this thing, So I did it, and I ended up getting it. And I remember I failed one English test, and it was like my world had ended. And I've always struggled with English, though, other than that. And that's because I have to pay attention. But with going through all the things as a kid, man, I think that the thing that I was searching for the most was just the acceptance and wanting to be that guy that everybody loved and wanted to be cool, wanted to be funny, wanted to be all these things, And the interesting thing is that God works in people's lives in very strange ways, because I had this mentality growing up, and I never had any of these problems. And then we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know what happened. I know that my dad had a job transfer, and I know that he was taking over a branch of this big company and all this kind of stuff. And my parents, when we moved there, it was paid-for housing by the company and all this stuff. I mean, it was a big deal for them to move them because they needed them. So we get there, and there's a road called Jimmy Carter Boulevard, and it's in Alpharetta, Georgia. And I honestly was the only white kid for about 10 miles in either direction. I'm not.
Oh my God, culture shock.
It was, I went from being that white Californian kid to this, and it was definitely a humbling experience. I was talking to my dad about this the other night. He's in the country visiting. It set me straight when it came to reality. Like, I'm not the shit.
Right.
I am not the coolest thing that ever happened. In fact, none of these people give a shit. And this is at 10 years old, you know what I mean? So, I'm sitting there and I was thinking, I would go to school and my teacher and everybody around me, I felt so isolated and so segregated and all this stuff. And then my parents divorced. My mom took off, went down to Florida. I was left up in there. I woke up one day and my sister and my mom were both gone. They didn't say anything. They wrote a note, like in the movies, like the stupid things that you see.
No way.
Yeah, I did. I swear to God, this happened. And
at 10?
At 10 years old.
Jesus.
And so, I woke up. My dad, woke up a little bit behind me. I got up to get some cereal or something, looked at the counter, the shit was there.
Wow.
I didn't really understand what happened. And my dad was like, yeah, whatever, she'll be back, because they fought a lot and all this kind of stuff. But ended up not coming back. And I didn't hear from her or know what was going on for a good month. So I just made the choice in my head. It was either I don't do well with this or I do. And that was the moment I think everything changed for me when it comes to socially fitting in and trying to do that whole deal, because that was important to me before, but it wasn't anymore, man. I knew I wasn't going to fit in. I was that guy. I was weird. you know. And so, like, a couple years went by, and I moved back to California, and that's when I met a lot of people, and I started to feel like I had some stuff going on. And so my mom was really out of my life that whole time. She stayed in Florida. She partied her brains out, and I still hated the fact that, like, it was destroying her life, man. And I watched it from the outside. I watched what it did to my sister, and it's just, and nothing's changed to this day. I mean, she's in really bad shape right now and all these kinds of things. So when I was about 15 is when I started getting involved with, like, women and stuff, you know, and that was my catalyst, because I had so little faith in humanity as it was, that, like, people were good people, that the second I got involved with a woman and something went wrong, like this girl cheated on me, I needed an escape. I needed to get out of what I was feeling. I needed to feel something else, and I knew how to do it because I had that small experience. And so I started smoking weed. I started drinking. And when I say I started smoking weed, the first day, you know how people always say, oh, yeah, it didn't work for me the first day. Not me, dude. Like, I was out of my mind. Like, I was sitting in the back seat of my friend's car, and I was in an outer space adventure. Like, you know, and so I get there, do that, and the next week I had bought a scale, I had bought a half ounce, I had a couple of bongs at my house, you know, and in all of that, the moral of that one is that I knew that there was an opportunity to make it so that I could continue ways and means to get more.
Yeah, no doubt.
In the first week I realized that this shit was expensive. You know, I was 15, 16 years old, and I was working. I mean, I worked at a theater. I was doing concessions and doing that kind of stuff. So, like, I would sell popcorn, and I had a bunch of friends that would come through there and all this. So, like, that's what I did. And it turned out that my boss was, like, a full-blown alcoholic. And so he didn't care what I did. If I had somebody run through there, I could put a sack in a cup with a lid on it and sell it over the counter.
Oh, my God.
And so, like, this is how I spent my first couple of years, you know, just thinking it was cool.
Of course.
It was. And then, you know, the heavier stuff was all around, and I wasn't too game on the heavier stuff yet. I just thought, like, this is cool. I'll just be able to escape like this all the time, and I'll carry on, and I'll carry on, and I'll carry on, man. And, you know, so I did pretty good. I saved money. I had a lot of cool little toys. My dad didn't really say much to me because he was too concerned that I was going to, like, kill myself or something, you know, from all the stuff that happened when I was a kid.
Right.
And he was laid back as it was. My stepmom hated every second of it. She's just like, how do you let him do this stuff at the house? And his excuse, I mean, for people that live in California or understand what California is like, the cops are animals. They will bust you and ruin your life for small, little things. And I'm not saying that, like, they should change the rules or do any of that kind of stuff, because there's some people that need it. But when it comes down to the smaller stuff, leave them alone, man. I paid taxes. I worked at regular jobs. I did the things that I was supposed to do. I showed up to school. I never tried to cause trouble or anything like that. But, geez, man, like, it was my biggest fear was always getting arrested for something small and having to go to do something, you know, in the prisons. And, like, I just kept running from that idea. And eventually, you know, when we got to about 18, 19, everybody started doing the hard shit. I remember when I was about 19 years old, one of my buddies came over, and he's like, he'd been into the coke scene for a while. And he's like, hey, you want to hit this? And I remember consciously thinking, like, if I do this, if I go down this road, it's going to get bad.
Right.
And I did it anyway.
Yeah, well, you're like, right, I'm in.
Yeah. And that's when things started to get real weird. And that's when my desperation started happening, because I wasn't able to control it enough to where I could balance out and keep money in my pocket.
But real quick, so 10 years old, you moved to Atlanta, Georgia. You're the only white kid, and so you're in a predominantly black community. Heavily,
man. My best friend's name was Koderick.
Okay, all right. Well, that tells us everything. All right. So at 10 years old, and then this went on for 5 years. What, you moved back at 15 to California?
I kind of skipped a little bit there because when I got back to California, it was really boring, man. Like, I just got back to California. I moved back when I was 12.
Okay,
and,
so 2 years.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was there for 2 years only.
All right.
And it was because my dad realized that, like, this was getting
Bad.
you know, like, because I was getting picked on a lot. I mean, I would go to school, and the school I was at was 6th through 8th grade. And so I was in 6th grade, and everybody was meshed together on the bus rides home and all this kind of stuff. I used to get bullied then because there were some big 8th grade guys, and it was rough, you know. So he got me out of there for that reason. Also, he had a job opportunity in California, and he wasn't going to pass it up. He hated the winters there. I hated the winters there because that was the whole thing. So, and he just didn't see a future living there. So we moved back. 7th and 8th grade, I did about half of 7th grade in California and then finished 8th grade there. It was just like I didn't fit in. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't do anything. I played a bunch of video games for like 2 years, you know. So I skipped to 15. When I hit my freshman year, I shot up 8 inches. I was tall. I cut my hair off. I used to have like long-ass blonde straight hair like Kurt Cobain.
I can see it, man.
You know, like I had the whole deal going.
Okay.
And so I cut my hair off, and, like, that's what I mean when I started to get attention from women, dude, because, like, before that, I was, like, this fucking butterball, dude. I was so preparing for a growth spurt that was phenomenal. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, in 3.5 months, I grew, like, 8 inches.
That is wild,
from
man.
5'8" to 6'3". I entered my freshman year at 6'3", and I was skinny and, like... You know, but for whatever reason, man, like, something in me changed, and I guess it's probably just puberty or whatever. I was such a rebellious kid, man. So that's when that whole deal happened. And, like, high school was pretty much a blur. I had a blast. I went to proms, did all the things. I wasn't an unpopular kid. I had a car. I had a lifted Jeep. I had all these things, you know, that I took for granted. And that's just, those were fun times. That's when it was still fun.
Right. Fast forward to 19 when you kick it into high gear.
Well, okay, so, and also the other reason I kind of totally blocked this out of my mind because it's such a stupid thing to do. If there's any listeners that are young and they're in like high school, college, whatever, before you're 21, don't drink and drive. And if you're ever, just don't drink and drive. When I was 18, I got in a fight with this girl that I was with, and I drank, like, I had like 8 shots of gin straight, got in the car, fucking went down to the beach and got in another fight with her in person. So somebody called the cops on us, and I was leaving as they were showing up. And so I'm driving out of the parking lot, fuming mad. I had punched the mirror off my car. I had probably broken my hand, all these different things. I mean, I never hit her. I would never give that kind of power to a woman because you go to prison, man. But, like, I was a very out-of-control person, particularly when I drink. And so I get pulled over, got a DUI, lost my license for a year. And so that whole year, I was having to bum rides and do all that kind of stuff, and it was really depressing,
Right.
And so, like, I kind of just skipped over that. So 19 happens when I try coke for the first time, and it was right about the end when I was going to get my license back. And I was trying to go to college during this whole time, which was difficult because there's, like, no public transit in California unless you're in the city areas.
Right.
We were living outside in a suburb and, like, where money's at. So, it was hard. It was hard for that whole situation to happen. So, like, school started waning. I stopped going. I just started seeing it as a money ticket because I would go and I would talk about all this kind of stuff and I would try to do my usual gig and sell to people and all this shit. But it just, then the ecstasy happened and then the accidental LSD trips and... And I say accidental because I just make bad choices when I'm drunk, man. And I was drunk from 8 in the morning. I would keep beers in my room cold, hidden. I would wake up because I was still living in my dad's house and drink like 3 or 4 beers, go to school, do some coke, and sit through class all geeked out.
This is high school or college?
This is college, man. When I was 19, I was
dude.
out of my mind.
How do you did you even pass?
A few of this, yeah, dude. I did good for the first couple of years. Like,
getting whacked.
Yeah. But the thing is that you can't maintain, man. Like, you just can't. You physically can't, you mentally can't, and you financially can't. I remember one night I was working as a butcher at an Albertsons by my house. And for those of you who know what a butcher is, we sell meat. And it fit my protocol pretty good because you got the cooler in the back. People don't really bother you too much because they think you're that weird guy in the back. But, like,
That's awesome.
Yeah. You know, it just, so that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Like, that's all I thought there was.
Being a butcher?
Being a butcher, doing a lot of drugs, and trying to, I guess, just be that. I don't know.
So you started selling weed when you were, what, 15?
Yeah.
And you were just selling weed all that time?
Yeah.
So we're talking about close to 10 years?
It's getting there. You know, I actually, it's about 7. Because what happened was that at around that time, a lot of my friends kept progressing, and we made a business out of it. We were definitely not stupid and didn't really mess around that much. It was more just about the using. We didn't have a lot of friends. We weren't out trying to do the party scene, going to the bars, doing all that kind of stuff. It was more just like focus on what we were going to do for the money.
Got it.
And it led us to some pretty dark places and meeting really shady people in situations that were really bad. And I remember the desperation and the bottom that happened. For me, actually, was after everyone got arrested. I had like 3 or 4 people in my little friend circle. They all got arrested. They were all doing time. And I got scared, man. And in the same process, my dad wanted me out of the house because I was doing too many stupid things and too many hard drugs. And so I ended up getting kicked out, and I couch surfed for a long time. I moved back into Carlsbad and lived at this dilapidated, it's just like I slept in somebody's kitchen, essentially, where they put like some wicker walls up.
Oh my God.
And just continued to do the same game that I was doing. And that's when like I really found crystal, dude, when the meth happened. Because everybody down there in that little central barrio, is what they call it in San Diego, was using meth, and it was cheaper than coke. And I was the only one that had a good connection on that, and so it just became this vicious cycle for a good year, where I would go to work at a bar as a busser and just meet people and continue on, you know, with that whole cycle. It was just me being me. That's all I knew. That's all I thought I was going to do. And I ended up moving out to my mother's house when I finally got scared enough that I was going to get busted. You know, I just hid. And she had moved out to this trailer park with my grandma.
This is in Florida, though,
no,
right?
No, she had actually come out to California. She made her way over there, I think, through my dad's help. He ended up giving her some money to move.
Okay.
Because she had blown through everything.
Of course.
And she had gotten this trailer out in the desert with my grandma that my sister helped her get. It was like, I mean, it wasn't a nasty place to live. It was a gated community. Everything was clean and all this kind of stuff. But, like, for her to be living on the other side of my grandma, who was, you know, failing in health and all these kinds of things, it was very, very sad. And so I moved out there because, like, I was in the middle of, like, the deepest addiction that I was going to hit. And didn't care, didn't have anything. I had a roof over my head, and I had a bunch of money saved, and I was scared out of my mind, you know, paranoia and all this stuff that they were coming to get me. And like,
how did you manage to save money in all this?
Because, buddy, it's part of...
It's just the way you are, huh?
Yeah. I mean, when I say not able to make it financially, like, if I'm, in my head, if I'm not putting away at least, like, 70% of what I make, I'm messing up. You know what I mean? Like,
you live lean.
Yeah, I do, because, and that's another thing that was really helped me in recovery. Because, like, that's all I had at the end. It was just being lean. And
okay.
So I had a pretty good amount saved, and I got out there, and it was just nonstop drinking, man. I stopped using the hard stuff, except for some pills, and kept going on that route for 2 years. 2 years. I went through 2 Christmases there, and the third one, when that started coming around, we went through Thanksgiving, and I was living at this place, and her boyfriend at the time was a schmuck. This guy tried to fight me on a daily basis because he was insecure, he was a drunk, he never had anything, all these different things, you know. And so my bottom, I'm sitting there one night. It was after Thanksgiving had passed. We had to go to a food line to go and get food so that we had something to eat on Thanksgiving. We went to the church, standing in the food line. I had filled a regular water bottle full of vodka so that I could put the shakes down enough to be able to fill out the paperwork for this. Because by this time, I'm physically dependent. I'm fully physically dependent on alcohol. Like, I could not hold a spoon of, like, I had to drink out of a straw in the morning in order to make it so I could get it down, because I couldn't turn my hand physically without it shaking the liquid out of the cups.
And how old were you at this time?
I was about 22.
22 years old.
Yeah.
And had to use a straw to drink.
Yeah, and it was because of the situation, you know, with my mom and living out there in that trailer. I mean, it was like full on.
Where'd you sleep?
I had this mattress that I found over in my grandma's, her side of the thing I brought over to the other side. It was just like this, probably 30 years old or something like that, piece of garbage. Put that on the ground, put a blanket on it, and I used to just sleep like that, and I did that for a couple of years.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, man. I mean, you go from that person that you think you are to the person that you're not supposed to be real quick. And when you don't have any boundaries on it, when somebody's telling you not to, when nobody is telling you not to, I should say, I mean, there was nothing that could slow me down. I didn't work. I didn't do anything. And there were people around me, too. It was weird. There was this guy, his name was Alan as well, and he was a little bit older than me, and he had gone through similar stuff, and he was trying to get his life together and all that stuff, and he lived right next door to us in this whole process. And it's one of those God shots, man, because he really helped me out. He was the first person to say, you probably should get some help, dude. You're too young for this. You got it bad. Like, I've seen this before. And I took his word for it because he really had seen it. He told me some stories. So after that Thanksgiving passed, going through that whole food line thing, eating, spiced canned tuna or whatever the hell that shit was that they had in there, and some bread. They had like Bimbo Wonder Bread. I went and I took out the last money that I had, and it was enough to get one of those 1.75 liter vodka things, the pop-off garbage drain cleaner vodka. And I drank the whole thing in a day like I had been. I had gone through that every day for years, so, I mean, I was dependent. And then I was out. I was out of money. I was laying there on the floor at about 2 in the morning when it started wearing off. I was already throwing up. I had already been throwing up blood and all these different things for weeks from not eating and just drinking that heavily. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm going to die. I am literally going to die at this point. Like, I'm either going to have to start stealing stuff again. I mean, and I'm not talking like little stuff, like, oh, I'll go into the store and stick a beer in my pocket. It would never sustain me. I would have to go and I would have to rob people. And somewhere in me, my self-will, my self-love that I had left told me to call my dad and ask for help. So I did that the next day, and that happened to be like December 2nd when I called him. And he got me on a plane to Costa Rica by December 7th. I had like $20 that I had left, and I put that all in my car, it was a miracle I still had a car.
It is, dude, it is.
No, you don't understand. Like, it wasn't much, dude. It was a Saturn SC1, if anyone knows these cars. It was a little 4-cylinder, 2-door thing, that I had sold my Jeep for so that I could buy a couple of pounds.
A couple of pounds of what?
Well, it was half of it was weed, and the other part of it was a bunch of coke and ecstasy. But the other part of it, I bought this $2,000 car, and it lasted me for a long time. But it needed all this work, so I put the $20 in my car, and I drove out to my dad's house. It barely made it to the house. I get there, and my dad, God bless him, he saw what shape I was in. He saw what was going on. He's like, "Do you need anything to sustain you through the night?" And I just told him, I was like, "Look, I need at least this much, because if I cold turkey detox right now, I could probably go into seizures in your house." So I made it through the night, got to the airport, and it wasn't enough. I still was having seizures, and I'll never forget sitting there at the airport with my dad before I came to Costa Rica. If you go to the airports and you used to drink, you know how expensive the drinks are. I had to have about 4 straight, I told the guy at the bar, it was like 4 straight martinis, no mixers, nothing in it. I just want the vodka. If you give me shots, I don't care. He goes, "Well, we don't serve shots at the airport." It was 8 in the morning.
Oh, dude.
So I'm doing this. I'm doing this in front of my dad, and that was when I flew to Costa Rica that day. Got here, spent the night at my Aunt Janet's house, and she asked me the same question: "Do you need anything to be able to get through?" And I remember thinking to myself, like, I need this. I am so physically dependent right now. I need to have this, man. And it was such a desperate moment in my life, like realizing that I was going to go into these horrible seizure, like throwing up fits if I didn't and consume something. So I ended up getting like a small bottle of whatever, and that was the last time that I actually got drunk. It was that night. And I cried. I cried in this room by myself in her house. And I woke up the next day and I went and checked in at the clinic, and I don't know if we're allowed to like mention names or whatever, but it was Costa Rica Recovery, man, and checked in there, and I remember having seizures because I went cold turkey. A lot of people got whatever it is, diazepam, to help cut the thing. But like,
Right.
my dad had told him that I wasn't in that bad of shape, because he didn't know. He didn't know where I was, essentially.
Right.
But yeah, man, I was bad. So like, I detoxed in there, and I was next to Trent in my room. And he's like, dude, I thought you were going to die. The first 3 days, I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. It was all just a blur. I seizured. I kicked and screamed, and my whole body was on fire. You know, I felt like I was having heart palpitations and all these different stuff, you know, and I didn't say anything to anybody. I was in a clinic in Costa Rica, and I remember waking up the third day and being like, how the fuck did I get here? Like...
It's brutal, man. It's fucking brutal.
Yeah, so, like, you know, the reality is that, like, I was 23, and my birthday's in February, so I was 23, I was going to be 24. I spent a good majority of all of this building thinking that it was, like, okay. Like, I could do this the rest of my life. I could do this. And it was because I was just drinking. It was because I'd quit all the hard stuff, blah, 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 blah. You know, but it just didn't work that way. So when I checked in there and I finally got through all the detoxing and all that kind of stuff, I went to my first meeting. And I say my first meeting, it was the first meeting that I had actually wanted to be there. Because when I got my DUI, I had to go through the California State STAR program. I had to go to these educational classes. I had to go to meetings. I had to do all this stuff in order to not have a mark on my record or whatever, you know. But that was the first time I'd been introduced to, like, real people that weren't just some professor, you know, educated police officer telling me this is what you have to do. And man, I'll never forget probably about the second week, because I still was just thinking I was going to get off, I was going to coast, I was going to be okay. And everyone kept telling me, like, listen, man, you're never going to be able to be who you were. You're never going to be that guy when it was fun ever again. And hearing that scared the hell out of me, because I was already depressed as it was. It was like, dude, now you're telling me that, like, this is it? This is all I got? That you guys? You know, I remember, like, you know, we got these old guys in there, oh, you got to sit and do this, and oh, you got to do that. And then you got the other guy, well, I was in the yard, and I was in the prison, and I was in this. And I'm thinking to myself, like, where's the life at? You know? So Christmas was coming up. And as you guys know, my date is not December 8th. It wasn't that night. It wasn't then. It was December 24th. So I went out with my aunt, and she's in recovery. She took me to this little Christmas party. It was a couple of her friends up in the hills somewhere in Gracia. And I get over there, and there was an open bottle of rum on the counter. And I'm looking at this. I had 3 weeks clean. That was exactly, like, that's another one of those God shots for me, because it took me less than 5 seconds to figure out a way to get that in my system.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So I made it, because I realized that it was like that clear rum or whatever, and there was mojitos that they had made, and it looked just like ice water. So I got a cup of big ice water, and I'm like, went over and stood by my aunt, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, look, it's ice water. Ha ha. Went back straight into the corner, filled the glass up, pounded a whole mojito. I was like, yeah, that was good. Nothing happened. Nothing changed. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel any better. I didn't feel less awkward. I didn't feel shit. So I kept trying to get more and more and more. Again, it was the cycle had started all over again. And I didn't make it very far, because she came over, she smelled me. She's like, are you drinking? Like, really? Really? And I was like, no. Oh.
I love it.
No, I'm not.
Of course not.
Of course, you know. And she's like, yeah, you are. Let's go. We got to go. And so I had to go back to the clinic. I had to talk to Jim. I had to talk to Jim Malloy. I had to tell him what happened. I had to explain what happened. And I had to ask to see if I could stay there, you know. Because I was only on a month stay, and that was my 3rd week there. And, you know, so they're like, well, look, it's Christmas Eve. Just sleep here. We'll figure it out in the morning. Right. So they let me stay. And I ended up calling my dad the next day, and he's like, I don't even know what to say to you right now.
Right.
I have no idea what to say to you right now. I'm just going to go by what they say as guidance, because I'm lost. I'm already pretty shot out with you as it is. Jim just said, why don't you just stay longer? So I did. I did a couple more months. I went and got a white key tag at the meetings. I had to tell everybody how sorry I was, because I was still a sorry motherfucker. And that was my experience, you know, but that was it. The last time I was so ashamed of myself when I went in there and picked up a white key tag. It was like I had lost all hope in myself. I was uncontrollably unable to stop doing the things that were ruining my life. And it finally hit me. And that was it. I was done. I got a real sponsor, somebody who would call me on my shit. He was an angry guy. He was Texas John. He came to the rehab that day after I'd asked him with a step guide. And he said, I'm only giving you this because me as a person, I can't help you. But you can help yourself as long as you're willing to do this work. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that day. He came down there with his dog. He was happy. He was walking around and had that step guide in his hand. And I sat there and I looked at it and I was like, what the look at this shit. It's like
it's long.
It's long.
Oh my God.
There's questions in here that I will never tell anybody.
Yep.
I'm never going to do this. He's like, look, if you don't do it, if you don't have something done by next week, I'm not going to work with you. Right. So I was like, fine. Wrote my first step out. Did the whole first step, and it was straight bullshit. And so, and at this time I'd been in there for a couple of months. And by the third month, I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I wasn't ready to go back to California and forget about it. I would have used as soon as I hit the ground, or even on a plane. Who knows? Yep. And so I called my dad. I was like, Dad, I don't know what I'm going to do. All I know is that there's people here telling me that I should stay in Costa Rica. I should stay in Costa Rica. There's going to be a halfway house here that John's opening. I'm going to stay. And he's like, well, I can't help you. I can't give you money. I can't do nothing. I have no idea what I'm sending money for. You could just be doing the same shit. And that was another reality check for me, is that I was on my own completely. So I got a job, and it was hard, because finding work here when you don't know what you're doing is hard. But I did. Got in the halfway house, paid my first month's rent. John was running it, so he couldn't sponsor me because all he saw was my character defects all day, and it drove him crazy. So he told me I had to find somebody else to work with, and I did that. So I was like, fine, let's see how it is. Went and asked Bobby. That's when everything changed for me. Yeah. When it came, I made it to about 6 months.
It changed for him too, man.
Well,
you helped him a lot.
Whether or not that's true, I always hear that from people when I talk to them, and they're like, yeah, it helped him. It's just as much as it helped you. And I'm sure it did. But nah, man, having somebody that was analytically perfect at communicating. Yes. Because I was such a shambles, man. I couldn't get a straight sentence out. I couldn't share. I couldn't talk. I was still just basically stuck, But I had managed to get a job, and I had managed to go to a few meetings, and I had managed to be able to get there by myself. And really because I didn't have anything else to do. So I worked my first 3 steps. I got through the third step, and I'll never forget going over to Bobby's house. And he told me, listen, my house is here. Get in a taxi, tell them that you need to go to this place, this place, this place. And I had about 5,000 colones for the rest of the month, and I was like the 19th. For people that know Costa Rica, that's not a lot. So, I'm eating nothing but cup of noodle. Yep. And everybody knows this about me. They know that I did not have food at this point. And so I got in the taxi, and I'm like thinking to myself, like, this is the stupidest thing I'm ever going to do. And I'm wasting all this money and wasting all this time to go and talk about myself. How is that going to help me? How is this going to do anything? So I get there, man, and his wife had made like this huge dinner, and it was amazing, and I hadn't eaten in like 3 months like that. I hadn't had a real meal in forever. So like I'm sitting there, we covered the third step, and it was like God had found me, dude. Like
Oh man. Wow.
I almost broke down in tears because I was thinking to myself, I was like, why are you helping me?
Yeah.
Why are you helping me get through this? Your family has like taken me in. I feel like I'm a part of your life. I feel like, I have somewhere to go now. I feel like I had hope again. And it was so priceless to me, man. Like, I would never be able to look myself in the mirror knowing that, like, I had let myself down again, let alone the people that had really spent the time this time to pay attention, to do the right things for me, because people pay attention to you when you're using. They pay attention whenever you got something.
Right.
But that's what did it, man. It was fellowship of being with a sponsor and actually finding a connection to something that had meaning and something that had direction. Because a lot of people, they get weird about it when people say the God word. They get weird about it when they say, you got to do this and you got to do that. Oh, well, that sounds like religion. Well, dude, where are you going? Where, I always ask that to my sponsees now. Where are you going? Like, Do you ever ask yourself that question? Because that's all I ever asked myself before I got clean is where am I going? And so, man, I got through my 3rd step, did a 4-step, 5th step, cranked on that. I got to a year, and I had a big meeting for a year, which was surprising because it's Christmas Eve.
Right.
You know, I picked up my key tag. I made it through that whole year, and I had all the people that I had looked up through that whole time were there, man. And everybody else that was in the clinic with me, except for like 3 people, had already started using again.
Yes.
So I'm sitting there at this anniversary, and they were still coming back getting white key tags, which God bless them. You know, everybody has to go through their own process. But like, I remember thinking to myself, I fucking made it.
Yeah.
I finally broke the cycle. I'm never going back. I will never, ever, ever be in that situation again. So it just, from then on, man, it's just like working steps, man. I still lived at the halfway house. I was there for a year and a half, being told what to do, had to be in bed by 9 o'clock, couldn't be up, you know, making noise at a certain time. We had one little TV in there that I couldn't watch anything on because John watched the TV. You know, and I was living with Jerome, and
Oh, Jerome!
Yeah, dude.
Oh, dude, you just brought back a name I haven't thought about. Old man Jerome, and I don't know how long. Didn't that guy used to walk around the clinic fucking naked and shit?
Oh, dude, he was out of his mind.
Oh.
Well, there's many a story.
Oh,
you know what
God.
I mean? Well, again, the same question kept coming up when I had about a year and a half. I was like, how did I fucking get here?
Yep.
You know? And, I mean, I was clean, and I still didn't, I had an idea of what it meant to, like, have a higher power, and I had an idea of what it meant to know thyself, and all these different things started happening in my life. You know, and I got a job offer that was better than what I was doing, and I decided to finally get my own place. I got a place with a roommate. I started making it, and I saved enough money because, like, you know, I told you before, I save money, man. It's what I do. I got a car. I got this old Subaru wagon with oxidized paint and all this kind of stuff wrong with it. I had to fix a couple of things, but, you know, then I ended up getting a car, and, man, did things change then? Everyone was like, listen, now that you got a car, you got to go to meetings. You got to start giving rides. You got to start giving back. You got to start doing all this stuff. And I had gone through a 4-step, Bobby, you know.
Right.
I remember him looking at me with a serious face. You got to start raising your hand. It's like, what do I got to give back, man? What do I have to tell somebody? You know, and it's interesting to me because, like, I had sponsees, you know, within the first couple of months, and I think it's because I have a great sales pitch, man. Like, when I share a lot of times, when I share a lot of times about eating cup of noodle and something strikes a chord with these people, man. It's like they know. It's like, oh man, right where I am. I was in a clinic. I hated myself, and I was eating cup of noodle.
Well, a lot of us watched you, man. A lot of us were around to watch you go through your stages. And I remember going to that halfway house because back in the day I was very involved in service. So I would go to the halfway house all the time, pick up guys for the meetings, drop them off. Remember my old Mercedes?
Yeah, dude, I would be like, Omar is balling. This guy is balling. He's got this Mercedes. He cruises up. He's looking good. So those were some good times for sure.
I'd forgotten. When you went back there, I actually picture the outside of that old black rock-looking weird house.
Yeah.
And, dude, there was like, I don't know, 12, 15 addicts in there at any given moment. I was there a lot. Now I remember you being in there.
Yeah.
I remember meeting with Trent.
Yep, you did. You went in that kitchen up there.
Remember?
I remember that. And I remember thinking to myself, because at that time when I was still there, I didn't take it that seriously, man. I still was just trying to wing it. And I remember seeing Trent's face change. He's like, I got to go do step work. And I was like, all right, bro, because he's one of those guys that I got along with because he's sarcastic like me. Right. I never took anything seriously. And so when I saw his face like that, I was like, all right, you know, let's respect that. Go over there, do what you got to do. Sit there with that book. You know? That's the first time I realized that, like, guys like you know, you're actually doing what you were supposed to do and giving back. It was just like, wow, man, I guess this is what we got.
It's a great thing, though.
Yeah, man. It definitely carried through with me because I ended up going and doing the same thing a few years down the road. I went over there. I've sponsored probably 15, 20 guys through that clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Just in that clinic. You know, I've got a couple of the guys that have some years now. I took a couple through all 12 steps, and all those kinds of things. But that's what it is, man. That's what we do, at least now.
It's a wonderful life we have today.
Yeah, dude. So fulfilling all of this, for me and my story, is that now I'm married to another recovering addict.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she just had 5 years.
Yep.
And a lot of people gave me a lot of flack about this whole deal because it's dangerous. And I'll say this on the record, since this is going to be recorded, that I did, in fact, go against many suggestions in this case, but I also made a very strong commitment to myself that if I was going to do this, I was going to be willing to go to any lengths to make sure that recovery stayed exactly where it was supposed to be first. And that's what kept things real. It worked only because of that fact. There's nothing else that would have kept our relationship intact if I had not put recovery first and she had done the same thing. So just to get that out there, because many people see it and think that it's just like, oh, well, no, it's like 0.01% of the population can get away with that.
Well, and that's 100% true, all right? And both of you guys are hardcore recovery. You guys have been married how long now?
We're coming up, it'll be 3 years legally speaking in March.
Okay. And again, for those of you listening, the Raquel that was a couple episodes before Alan's, that's his wife, all right? So we're talking about two very awesome people who take recovery to the absolute most serious degree.
Right. So just to clarify those things, because, a lot of people see from the outside and they think what they want to think,
Listen, the reality is you got no business getting into a relationship in the first year. You really have to do a lot of work. You really have to at least try and get to that fourth step.
Yeah.
That is a big key. And I know you were already done with your fourth step.
Oh, and so I wouldn't even talk to her until after she had done some steps.
Right, of course. You got to be, yeah.
You got to be out of your mind. It's like I love this quote. It's like going to a junkyard to be in a relationship in recovery, or at least in early recovery. It's like going to a junkyard, picking out a car and expecting it to run like a new Beamer. It ain't going to happen, dude. It's got dents and dings and garbage and shit that probably hasn't worked in years. And now that's what brings me to this, man. I'm here. I'm clean. I love my life. I've helped several people now, and that's what keeps it real for me. I still chair a meeting here and there. This is the first time in a long time I'm not on that board for every single week to do a meeting. I am on there now for making coffee for the Tuesday meeting. I do service, man. That's what keeps me clean. That's what makes sure that I have a good life today, because all the other stuff, all the jobs, the monetary things, the things that come and go, that's what they do. They come and go. But the reality is that my connection with the group and being clean is the only thing that's important. It's the only thing that sustains me. Everything else will go out the window as soon as I make that choice, the wrong choice to use. It's impossible to fix once that happens. And yeah, I feel grateful beyond belief with the 6 years. I feel grateful that I got to spend Christmas with my dad in the correct form this year.
How was that? You guys just had dinner last night.
Yeah.
How is the relationship these days?
Oh, man, it almost brings him to tears every time he sees me, just because he knows where I was. He knows what I was on. He knows where I was going. I'm actually something he loves to call his son today. We went out to dinner. We had a great dinner. We talked about the future. We talked about plans, about what we want to do. Talked about kids.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
When are those coming?
Well, that's the same thing he said. It was like, really? Because even though I still have 6 years, he still sees his adolescent, out of his mind, no direction kid sometimes, because I'm distant from him. I live in Costa Rica. He lives in California. So we see each other probably twice a year. So for him to actually really start to believe is worth more to me than anything out there. It just is.
It's one of the greatest gifts you can get is that recognition from your parents, more so because they're the ones that are the most wrecked by what we put them through. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is the case. We hurt the ones closest to us more than anything. And we think it's just us. Oh, we're just harming ourselves. We think, the using's not doing anything else. Bullshit. It is killing your relationships with your family. It's killing them inside. It's the same thing. So, in the beginning it is a selfish program, but after a few, if you make it a few, start fixing what you can, start connecting, start letting people see who you are, because at the heart of it, most of us are good people.
Yes.
They're just waiting for you to come back. And I say that being, basically shipped off to another country as a son. Like they didn't want anything to do with me. They said, get out of here, and now I don't have that today. They want to be a part of it. They want to be with me. They want to contribute as well as me contribute to their lives. So it's good, man. To me, I couldn't have asked for anything more. And my wildest dreams were fulfilled, even though I didn't know they were actually what I wanted. So I think that's about all of my story.
Well, that's quite a story, man. It's quite a story. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us. That was an amazing story, man. Absolutely inspiring for the newcomers, which is, the whole purpose for me doing this is because stories like yours are so impactful for the newcomers. You were just saying a minute ago about, I don't know what people get out of my story or my share, but maybe something resonates with them. All of it resonates. We've all been there. We've all hurt our family members. We've all hit those bottoms where we're in this pit of despair where we don't know where to turn to or what to do. And we're so close to death that when we finally come out of that hole and we find recovery, it gives that newcomer those glimpses of hope. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and that's really what I hope to connect with anybody that I speak to, anybody that's in that desperate spot. It's just to bring them full circle and make them realize that even at the worst, lowest point in your life, if you're willing to change, to stop, and just listen for a second to maybe somebody that wants to help you, you'll be okay. Like, things will get better. And that's all it takes, man. So that desperation that you just spoke of is what it's about. It's what I know it's a horrible thing that people don't understand in the beginning. Oh, the gift of desperation. Well, you'll see. You will see. People tell me you were so young when you came in. I felt old. I've seen enough.
Well, if you started heavily, you picked up coke at 19.
Yeah.
And you crashed at 22, so you had
3 years.
So 3 years.
That's all it took. That's all it took, man.
Dude, I started at 29, almost 30, and by the time I was 32, I was crawling into the rooms. All right, so I was about 4 years. So I get it.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long. Once you pick up the coke, it's a quick drive down to the bottom.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a gasoline or a catalyst to the addict's core.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure.
It brings out the best in us.
Something like that.
Yeah.
All right, Alan. So let's jump into the final part of the show, which I call For the Newcomer. And for the newcomer, I'm going to ask you 5 questions about early recovery, right, and you're going to respond with inspiring and insightful answers you can share with our newcomers.
I'll do my best on that one.
I know you will. You ready? All right. What was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
The thing that was the scariest part for me, because I had realized how physically dependent I was, that I thought I would physically be unable to survive stopping. And also I thought I was going to be emotionally incapable of dealing with the reality that I had created. It was the fear of facing the reality of who I was, what I'd become, the things I had done, and not having an escape anymore or an excuse to act the way that I was still acting.
Absolutely. Many of us go through that same feeling. Not everybody, because for you was the alcohol withdrawal, which not everybody goes through, but that in and of itself is like, am I going to die?
Yeah.
So, that's very, very real. Okay. So number 2, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery, when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
It was actually, I talked to my sponsor about this the other day. It was actually when I was working at this call center. It was in a mall, and there's a bar downstairs at the mall. And I actually had thought it was the first time that I had said no to people asking me to go to the bar, but it wasn't.
Right.
The time that I realized that it had really started to work in my life is when I had been open enough with the people around me. They're normies. They're not people that do what I do. they actually paid attention enough, and I had been open enough to where they didn't ask me to go to the bar. They had said, I know that you're going to go to your house and all that stuff. It was a great day with you today. And I just walked and I said goodbye. I didn't feel awkward. I didn't feel like I was outcasted because I wasn't going to go and party with them. Any of that. I went straight out the front door. I felt free as I'd ever felt in my life. And that was one of those moments. The sun was out. It was like, I couldn't explain it to you. So
that's a beautiful story. And I know those feelings of the first time I looked outside sober in recovery and noticed just that. The sun's out, clear blue skies. I live in Costa Rica. It's awesome. And I'm sober.
Exactly.
So I get it. So many of us do. It's the reason why I ask these questions, because there's people that are in early recovery that go, I know that feeling. I remember that. And that's what I want to do. I want to help people identify with those moments in their recovery where they really felt hope for the first time. Perfect. Number 3, do you have a favorite book you would recommend to a newcomer that you read in early recovery? Or not?
Well, I am somebody I don't read necessarily, and it's because of my attention span. I am freaking out of my mind still to this day, and that's why I do the exercise. But if I did have something to suggest, and I know that what I actually do, I suggest to my sponsees that they watch Fight Club. And
dude, that's the first. I love it. First new suggestion I've never heard. Fight Club. Expand.
And the reason that I do is because the guy struggles with the dual personality through the entire thing, and he struggles with actually alcohol addiction, all the different things, and it's really the fact that like we are, or at least I was, very similar to him. I felt like the guy that couldn't accomplish anything, that was scared, that did what I was supposed to do inside my head, and then on the outside I would try to portray this guy that was completely confident, that had it all figured out, everything was perfect, all this kind of stuff like that. And in the end, it all crashes because you can't do that. You can't do it, you know. And it is a book too, so I guess if I was to suggest to read it, you know, you could read it. And I guess the book's actually better too, but you know,
I love it.
That's what I would suggest, just because it makes it very clear of the searching that we go through to find an answer to our inner turmoil.
It's true. And as a matter of fact, I lived with undiagnosed ADD for a long time. So same thing with me, all right? Like reading a book, dude, I get 2 pages in and I'm thinking about everything else but reading this book. So for me, seriously, all right, even to this day, when I discovered audiobooks, it changed my life. I have consumed more books in the last 2 years through Audible than I have in my entire life. So for those of you out there that are like Alan and I, all right, you might want to consider checking out Audible, all right, and download some books. And go see Fight Club. If you have not seen Fight Club, it's absolutely true. That is addiction, all right? Okay, moving on. What is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Oh, man, this is one of those things, because I've gotten so many good ones in the years now that are just, I mean,
you can give us a few.
Life-changing. I think the main suggestion is that, because in the beginning when you're new and you sit in the meetings and you look at people's faces, you know that principles before personality thing they always talk about?
Uh-huh.
Okay, my sponsor, he realized that I was having a tough time stomaching some of the stuff that was going on because of my own ego, right? And he said, listen, instead of sitting there staring, giving them a fucking stink eye, why don't you stare at the floor and just listen to what they're saying? Don't think of their face. Don't think of their hair. Don't think of, you know, any of the stupid things that I was telling myself in the beginning. Because, like, that's what it is. My inability to, like, pay attention carries into every part of my life. And when I don't listen to things, I might miss something, you know. I might not hear what I need to hear. And that was in the beginning. That was, like, the first suggestion that, it's not even a real suggestion. It's more like, do this, otherwise you're just being an asshole. And that's what triggered with me. It was like, okay, all right, I'll stare at the floor. And I still do it to this day, don't get me wrong. Like, more often than not.
That is an absolutely great suggestion. I have never heard that one, but it makes total sense. And I will actually do that sometimes inadvertently. I'm just staring at the floor so I can concentrate.
Yeah, Yeah, because my mind is very difficult to put at ease. It's just it's very hard. So I use the meetings now for that. A lot of people think I'm a very serious guy because I don't smile a lot or I don't do a lot of things in the meetings like others do. No, it's because I'm actually trying to pay attention. So
a little more insight about Alan that I didn't know. This is good stuff, and I've known Alan for 6 years.
Yeah.
All right, so if you could give a newcomer only one suggestion, what would that be?
Be yourself. Allow the change to happen. When you're writing your step work, don't be scared of what you're going to write down. The main thing is, do step work. Okay, that's one of them. But
of course.
The main thing when you're writing your stuff down, don't answer the questions trying to be somebody you're not, because you just spent the last years of your addiction being that person. You're not that guy anymore. Or that girl. You don't have to be that guy or girl ever again. Be yourself. Write down exactly how you feel, what you think, the way that you want to be. Because if you don't do it at the core, it's never going to take hold, and you're still going to be trying to hide something. And I don't hide anything today. I just don't. I don't have to, and it makes me happy on a daily basis. So just be yourself.
Beautiful, man. I love it. Great suggestions, Alan. And before we say goodbye, I have one more question for you. Of all the meetings you have attended anywhere in the world, which group is your favorite, and where is that group located?
Well, it's our home group, man. The Vigilance Night meeting, of all things, because that's where I got to go. It was when I went through all my changes. I've gone through several of my anniversaries. I've gone through several tough things. Losses of jobs, getting of jobs, changing of homes, buying of homes, doing all these different things, So it's that group, the Vigilance at Night. The best meetings, though, are definitely there for me.
The Vigilance Group in La Sabana, Costa Rica. Yeah. We have now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the Share Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.thesharepodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then.